steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable!
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal. Touchdown! Kansas City! Damian Williams runs to immortality and will be remembered forever in the Chiefs' kingdom.
Everybody, and welcome in again to another Sunday night here on KC Radio 97.7 FM for Talkin American Footy with me, Brent, Sternberg. Another Sunday night rolls around, the NFL season that keeps on keeping on. Of course, last time we spoke in week 12, last Sunday night, oh my golly gosh, there was a lot happening, including the reigning MVP who come down with COVID. There was a team that was preparing to play without any quarterbacks. Another team was preparing to play the rest of the season with no home stadium to play in. And of course, we had a coach fired as well, thrown in for good measure. So that was leading into week 12. It's safe to say that this week has been a little bit quieter on the news front, although we've still had some players testing positive and some people sort of moving on and off active rosters and all of that. But it looks like it's all systems go for week 13 tomorrow in the NFL, a week, of course, that had no Thursday night football game as a result of some games being moved around last week. We'll go back and have a look at last week 12, with a schedule that was moved around a lot. We had 2 games on Thanksgiving. We were supposed to have 3, but we only had 2, and the first one was a big win to the Houston Texans. They beat Detroit 41-25 to Sean Watson and Will Fuller with the stars of the show in that one. Watson had 318 yards and 4 touchdowns, and Will Fuller had 6 catches, 171 yards and 2 touchdowns. But there was some big news regarding Will Fuller, some pretty bad news, some awful news for him and the Texans, which I will get to in a little while. J.J. Watt had a pick 6 for the Texans, and Detroit lost their 4th straight game on Thanksgiving. And of course, we know that was the end of Matt Patricia and General Manager Bob Quinn. They're both gone. Darrell Bevel will make his coaching debut tomorrow for Detroit. The other game on Thanksgiving was Washington, who beat Dallas convincingly in the end, 41-16. It was a rout for the football team on Thanksgiving that sent them to the top of the NFC East for a little while before the Giants had a big win on Sunday. Antonio Gibson was huge. He had 3 touchdowns in that one, and Dallas, hugely disappointing loss after they beat Minnesota in a pretty big win the week before, and they got a couple more injuries to the offensive line with Cam Irving and Zach Martin going down as well. So they were the 2 winners on Thanksgiving, Houston and Washington. The Sunday games, the Raiders, who had been really good, they were pretty bloody disappointing, it has to be said. They went on the road to the Falcons and got flogged 43-6. Derek Carr, who was having a good year, a good season, up until last week, he was 22 of 34, 215 yards and an interception, and he ended up being replaced late in that one by Nate Peterman. In the end, after that game was gone for the Raiders and the Falcons, that's their most points scored in a game since week 9, 2016, 43 points. So, of course, that was the year they ended up playing in the Super Bowl. It's their 4th win of the season. The Falcons, they moved to 4-7. The Raiders go to 6-5. The Chargers, they went out to Buffalo and went down to the Bills 27-17. It was the Bills' first win over the Chargers since 2008. There was 4 turnovers in total in this one. Most of them come in an absolutely bonkers last quarter where each team just seemed to be giving it back to the other. The Bills, with this win, they are 8-3 in back-to-back seasons for the first time since 95-96, and they look like they're steamrolling towards another division title and a playoff appearance as well. A nice win there over the Chargers. The Giants, they beat Cincinnati 19-17. Brandon Allen was in at quarterback for the Bengals, and he wasn't too flash. 17 of 29, 136 yards, a touchdown and an interception. The worrying signs there for the Giants is that Daniel Jones injured his hamstring, and he looks like he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. The Giants, they did win that one in spite of losing their starting quarterback, and they've now won 3 straight games for the first time since 2016. So a 2-point win there in a close tussle with the Bengals. Tennessee had a really big win over Indianapolis, 45-26. Derrick Henry was huge again. No one seems to be able to stop him at the moment. 27 rushes, 178 78 yards, and 3 touchdowns. AJ Brown, 4 catches, 98 yards and a touchdown. He returned an onside kick attempt late as well for a touchdown for Tennessee. Indianapolis, Phillip Rivers was replaced late in that one by Jacoby Brissett. They got him out of there, out of harm's way. Tennessee, they've won 3 of the last 4 road games over Indianapolis, so that was a huge win to go back to the top of the division and stop the Colts from sweeping them. The next game, Cleveland had a close fought encounter with Jacksonville. They won 27-25. Mike Glennon, as I said last week, was the starter for the Jags in that one. And his stats, he looked okay. 20 of 35, 235 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nick Chubb was enormous for the Browns, 19 rushing attempts, 144 yards and a touchdown. And it really was a day for the running backs because James Robinson on the other side, he had 22 rushes, 128 yards and 1 touchdown. And with that win, Cleveland, they will now finish with 8 or more wins for the first time since 2007. So they look like they're heading towards a playoff spot as well. Minnesota, they got out of jail against Carolina. 1-point win there, 28-27 winners. They had 3 giveaways of the Vikings in a win for the first time since week 13, 2010. Kirk Cousins played okay, 34 of 45, 307 yards and 3 touchdowns. Delvin Cook had 18 rushes and 61 yards before he went down with an injury. And Jeremy Chin, the rookie safety for the Panthers, he scored on fumble returns for touchdowns on consecutive plays in the third quarter. So there's a rarity. The Carolina defense, they gave up 18 points in the fourth quarter. That was the deciding factor in that one. So the Minnesota Vikings got out of jail. New England as well got out of jail. They beat Arizona with a last-second field goal from Nick Folk, their kicker, 50-yard field goal as time expired. They won 20-17. Cam Newton, 9 of 18 for 84 yards and 2 touchdowns, so a bad afternoon for him. Kyler Murray wasn't that much better, it has to be said. 23 of 34, 170 yards and an interception, so he's struggling a bit, Kyler Murray, and they let that one slip the Cardinals. It's a game they would have expected to win, but they went down by 3 points on the road. Miami, they made light work of the New York Jets. They won 20-3. Ryan Fitzpatrick played in place of an injured Tua Tagovailoa, 24 of 39, 257 yards and 2 touchdowns. Sam Darnold was back for the Jets, 16 of 27, 197 yards and 2 interceptions. So not a great game back for Sam Darnold. Miami, they've allowed a total of 3 points against the Jets in 2 games this season. 3 points last week, and of course they shut them out earlier in the year. So another win there for Miami. They moved to 7-4. New Orleans, they beat Denver, who of course played with no real quarterback. There was 91 passing yards combined in this one, which is the fewest in a game since week 14, 1982. Taysom Hill had 78 passing yards with an interception, and of course Kendall Hinton, who was the emergency quarterback for the Broncos, threw for 13 yards. 1 of 9 for 13 yards and had 2 interceptions. Latavius Murray, he did all he could for the Saints, 19 attempts, 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. So a big win there for the Saints, 31-3, as you would expect. San Francisco surprising winners over the Rams, 23-20. And that means they've swept the Rams in back-to-back seasons for the first time since 2008-2009. It was a Robbie Gould game-winning 42-yard field goal as time expired in that one. Deebo Samuel was big for the Niners, 11 catches and 133 yards. Jared Goff struggled a bit too, 19 of 31, 198 yards and 2 interceptions. So a big win there for the Rams. For the Niners over the Rams in the division. They've swept them. Now they seem to have a pretty good record against the Rams in recent times, the Niners. Kansas City, they beat Tampa Bay 27-24. They are the second team to double-digit wins this year, Kansas City. They are now 10-1. Tyreek Hill was unstoppable. 13 receptions, 269 yards and 3 touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes, all in all, 37 of 49, 462 yards and 3 touchdowns. Mahomes, he accounted for nearly 500 yards of offense in this one. Tom Brady, not so good. 27 of 41, 345 yards. Threw 3 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions as well. And Gronk had his best game of the year as well. 6 catches for 106 yards. So it was the old firm there linking up Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, but not enough for the Bucs to get the win there at home over Kansas City. On Sunday Night Football, Green Bay made light work of Chicago, as we might have expected. 41-25 winners there. The Packers, the second most points against Chicago that they have scored in the Super Bowl era. Aaron Rodgers was pretty good again, 21 of 29. Only had 211 yards, but threw 4 touchdowns. And on the other side for the Bears, Mitch Trubisky was back in as the starter for the Bears, 26 of 46, 242 yards, 3 touchdowns, but 2 picks in a pretty dismal overall performance for the Bears, who are now 5-6, and the Packers moved to 8-3. Monday Night Football was Seattle and Philadelphia, and Seattle ground their way to a 23-17 win over the Eagles. DK Metcalf in that one, the receiver there for the Seahawks, had a career-high 177 receiving yards. Carson Wentz struggled again. His struggles continue. What a fall from grace it's been for the former number 2 overall pick. 25 of 45, 215 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. They actually brought in Jalen Hurts for one play, the Eagles. I thought that was a little bit bizarre, and I guess a lot of people did. If they're going to bring him in, why would you bring him in for just one play? So the Eagles went down in that one by 6 points. Seattle moved to 8-3 and atop their division. Philadelphia are 3-7-1, and their dismal season continues. And then finally, on Wednesday Night Football, we had Baltimore, who played the Steelers tough but weren't good enough in the end. Unfortunately, they went down 19-14. The Steelers remain the only undefeated team, 11-0. Bud Dupree, the big story in that one for the Steelers, a torn ACL. So that's a massive blow for the front seven there for the Steelers. Baltimore, they cycled through at the running back position, RG3 and Tracy McSorley. Excuse me, neither of them could really get the Ravens offense going. After starting 5-1, Baltimore, they've now lost 4 of their last 5 games, and of course the Steelers have swept them. So if they're going to get into the playoffs, the Ravens, they're going to have to do it with via a wild card spot. The biggest winner from week 12 for me was Tennessee for the second week in a row. They've had 2 really big wins last week, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, in overtime against the Ravens, where they come from behind and Derrick Henry rumbled for that touchdown to pinch the game in overtime. And then this week, on the road against Indianapolis, an Indianapolis team that had beaten the Titans only 2 weeks before. That was a huge win, not just to go to the top of the division at 8-3 Tennessee, but also to avoid being swept by Indy, like I said a moment ago. And the biggest loser for me was the Raiders. It was a team that a lot of people were starting to really get to be excited about. And I even said last week that they are the team that I think are the best equipped to beat the Chiefs in that conference. They'd want to play a bit better than they did last week against the Falcons, who had been struggling. They're not going to do anything this year, the Raiders, if they're going to throw out performances like that. So they'll be pretty keen to get back on the winners list. Tomorrow in week 13, we didn't have any teams on the bye last week, but we will have 2 in week 13, and I'll turn my attention to week 13 when we return on Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg. You're listening to KC Radio 97.7 FM on this Sunday evening. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on this Sunday night on KC Radio 97.7 FM, where we are about to go and have a little preview of week 13, which will begin tomorrow. Most weeks I say, each week that I am looking ahead to begins in earnest on Monday mornings. Week 13 will actually begin tomorrow because we didn't have a Thursday night football game this week. It was set to be Baltimore and Dallas, but that game has been moved actually to Wednesday, I believe. I'll get to that in the next segment, but it's going to be another opportunity for us to see some more teams play on Tuesday night football. We haven't had too many Tuesday night football games in NFL history, have we? We seem to be getting a whole bunch of them this year for obvious reasons. So before the break, we had a look back at week 12, and now we'll turn our attention to the early games in the 1 p.m. window tomorrow, 5 a.m. our time, of course, beginning with New Orleans at Atlanta. These 2 teams, of course, met only a couple of weeks ago, and New Orleans smashed Atlanta on that particular afternoon. They play again, this time in Atlanta. And how about this? The Saints going up against the Denver offense last week that, of course, didn't have any recognized quarterbacks, and they had basically an undrafted wide receiver who was a backup quarterback in college turned wide receiver, playing at quarterback in his first ever start, and likely, with all due respect, his only ever start at the position. The Saints allowed just one pass completion the entire game, which is a crazy stat in crazy circumstances in a crazy season. But it's not really all that crazy, is it? I mean, we probably should have expected something like that. And to be honest, just to digress and have a quick sort of thought on the Broncos, they scored 3 points last week, like I mentioned before the break. They actually did well to do that. I mean, I was going into that game thinking I'm not sure how a team playing without any recognised quarterback could score anything. So to be able to at least avoid being shut out, I mean, that was a moral victory for the Broncos. Back on the Saints and back on this game, Taysom Hill is 2-0 as the Saints starter, but questions about his long-term viability as the sort of replacement there for Drew Brees persist. He certainly hasn't set the world on fire. The New Orleans run defense has set the world on fire. They have allowed one offensive touchdown since week 9, but they haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher in 49 straight games. For context, that is the fourth longest streak in the league since 1950. So it'll be interesting to see. The Falcons will be pretty keen tomorrow to break that drought. Atlanta, they set season highs last week with 5 sacks and 5 turnovers, including a pick 6 by Deion Jones, and piled up 43 points against the Raiders last week on only 304 total yards of offense. So they had, an average sort of total in terms of offensive yards, but still put up 43 points. That's what takeaways and pick sixes and sacks and things are gonna do for you. I always think that these games are difficult to pick, New Orleans and Atlanta, all division games, but this particular one, these are two teams in the South that don't like each other. It's an underrated rivalry, actually, probably one of the most underrated rivalries in the league. But this Saints team is a good team, and I think even if their offense continues to struggle a little bit with Taysom Hill, their defense should get them over the line. So I think New Orleans will win this one and go to 10-2, and they will be the third team to get to double-digit wins. The next game is a battle in the NFC North with Detroit at Chicago. Chicago, it was the defense that powered them to a 5-1 start earlier in the season, but Chuck Pagano's group has been unable to lift the team the last few weeks with the offense struggling. Of course, a 5-game losing streak now for the Bears, who have gone to 5-6. And this will be the Lions' first game under interim coach Darrell Bevel, who has gone from the offensive coordinator to the head coach. Detroit, they've lost 4 of their last 5 games by double-digit points, by at least 10 points. So they're getting convincingly beaten, whereas Chicago, they have won 5 straight against Detroit. And they are at home in this one. Detroit 4-7, like I say. The Bears 5-6. Really tough one to pick, only because both teams are going pretty ordinary at the moment. Mr. Trubisky looks like he'll start again for the Bears. I'm going to say the Bears at home in a game that, to be honest, I will not be watching, because I don't think there's going to be too much reason to watch this one. And I'm going to say the Bears defense can come up with some more plays than Detroit. But that is a game that can go either way, and it's two teams that are going nowhere. The next game is Indianapolis at Houston, the 7-4 Colts against the 4-7 Texans. I mentioned we had some news on Will Fuller during the week after he had a big game on Thanksgiving. His season is done after testing positive for a banned performance-enhancing substance, which is crushing news for Fuller and the Texans after he was enjoying a career year just as he was set to reach free agency at the end of this season. His six-game ban that he got will carry over to the opener of next season, so it'll be interesting to see how teams view him now that would have otherwise been interested in giving him a big payday after a breakout season. Houston, they're 4-3 with interim coach Romeo Crennel. Of course, they were 0-4 with Bill O'Brien. The 449 total yards by the Titans last week were the most allowed by the Colts in any game this season. They've had a pretty good season defensively. But they surrendered 35 points in the first half, 1 week after giving up 28 points in the first half against the Packers. And left tackle Anthony Costanzo went down with a knee injury, and he won't play tomorrow for the Colts. So that's a pretty big out for them. Indy, they're 27-9 against Houston, which is the highest winning percentage of any team against an opponent in history with a minimum of 35 matchups. So I think that they will make it 28-9, the Colts, and they will go to 8-4, and they will beat Houston, who haven't been too bad in the last few weeks as the schedule has eased up. The next one, Cincinnati, will go down to the Miami Gardens, the Florida Gardens, to play the Miami Dolphins, who are 7-4. The Miami defense has now come up with at least one takeaway in 17 consecutive games. That's dating back to last season, obviously, which is a league best streak. And led by, maybe not led by, but Xavier Howard, the cornerback there, who had a pick in his third straight game last week and holds the league lead with 7 interceptions overall. Doesn't look like Tua is going to play. He will be active, but Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to play. Tua still struggling with a thumb injury on that right hand of his. Miami, they've allowed 18.6 points per game this season, which is the fewest in the league. For the Bengals, Brandon Allen, his 4th career start last week went pretty much as one might have expected. He finished 17 of 29 for 136 yards with 1 touchdown, an interception, and a lost fumble. The Bengals, they scored their first touchdown on a 103-yard kickoff return by Brandon Wilson. And Brandon Allen and the offense didn't find their way inside the Giants' 20-yard line again until the final minutes of the game. So they really struggled on offense. The Bengals, they're 0-2 this season when allowing 20 points. So even when the defense is allowing under 20 points, they still are not winning. And really, the biggest news for the Bengals during the week was that Joe Burrow had successful ACL surgery. And he obviously is their future. So it's funny that, the biggest news last week was their quarterback who went under the knife. I don't think they'll be able to match it with the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins will win at home and go to 8-4, and the Bengals will go to 2-9. And of course, with that tie earlier in the season with Philadelphia. Jacksonville at Minnesota is the next one. Minnesota, the wide receiver, Chad Beebe, muffed a punt deep in their own territory with 2 minutes and 10 to play on Sunday. But the defense kept the damage on the next drive to a field goal. And then with no timeouts, Kirk Cousins marched the Vikings 75 yards on 7 plays and a 10-yard touchdown strike to Chad Beebe, of course. And then 1 missed field goal to Joey Sly later, the Carolina Panthers kicker who couldn't kick the field goal. The Vikings escaped with a 28-27 win. Minnesota, they've won 4 of their last 5 after starting 1-5. They got out of jail to get their 5th win last week over Jacksonville. They're 5-6 now. Jacksonville, of course, 1-10, and they announced Sunday, the Jags, that they have dismissed general manager David Caldwell, and I don't think the firings will stop there, unfortunately. For the Jags, their 10th consecutive loss will clinch a 3rd straight season with double-digit defeats, unfortunately. For Jacksonville, Mike Glennon, he made his first start since 2017 last week, and as I alluded to before the break, the stats he put up they weren't too bad, actually, and it looks like he will start again for Jacksonville against the Vikings on the road to the Vikings. The Vikings, I don't think, should have too many problems with that one. The next one is the Raiders at the New York Jets, the 0-11 New York Jets. It was a nightmare performance for Derek Carr, last week, who lost 3 fumbles, all on sacks, and threw a pick 6, and Josh Jacobs as well lost a fumble too. So they were sort of doomed, really, in that one on offense. The Raiders, they committed as well a season-high 11 penalties for 141 yards. Josh Jacobs, who lost a fumble last week, he will not play tomorrow. So that's bad news for everyone that has him in fantasy. Get him out if you've got him in your lineup. The Jets, they're allowing 30-plus points in all 6 non-division games this week, which is the second longest streak in the NFL since the conferences split into 4 divisions in 1967. So they're breaking all kinds of records. The New York Jets, the records that you don't want to break. This is in New York. Surely the Raiders will get a win here. They started really well last year, remember, the Raiders, and then sort of fell apart once December rolled around. I hope that loss to the Falcons is not a sign of things to come. Surely they won't have any issues with the Jets on the road here. They should get their 7th win of the season. The Raiders, a big game here between 2 8-3 teams and teams in the hunt for playoff spots. Cleveland and Tennessee. Tennessee, who are obviously on top of their division. This is going to carry big implications for the playoffs. Derrick Henry, he's averaging 114.4 rushing yards a game this season, which is the most of any running back, and he rushing for 140 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half alone on his way to a 178-yard performance on 27 carries last week. He's now gone over 100 yards in each of his past 3 games against the Colts, and Indy have not allowed any other rusher to surpass the century mark since the start of last season, so they can handle anybody else but not Derrick Henry, which is really, there's no shame in that. Cleveland, their win over Jacksonville means the franchise will have its first non-losing season since 2007. Cleveland, though, their minus 21 points differential is the worst for an 8-3 team through 11 weeks ever. Nick Chubb, though, is having a massive season. For mine, he is the best running back in the game right now. At least he's the most important for his team. This is why the Cleveland is 6-1 with 11 rushing touchdowns while averaging 26 points a game and almost 200 yards, 199 to be exact, per game with Nick Chubb. That's in 7 games, with Nick Chubb. In 4 games without him, the Browns are 2-2 with no rushing touchdowns. They're averaging 20.5 points per game and 95.5 rushing yards per game. So with Nick Chubb, they're averaging 200 rushing yards a game. Without him, they're not even averaging 100. With Nick Chubb healthy in the backfield, the Browns are going to the playoffs. So Nick Chubb, for mine, is the best running back in the game right now. Sorry, Derrick Henry. Sorry, Delvin Cook. They're having great seasons. Nick Chubb is number 1. Okay, they were the early games, or they are the early games tomorrow, which will kick off at 5 a.m. We'll take a little break, and when we return, we'll have a look at the mid-afternoon games, as well as Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and maybe even Wednesday and Thursday and Friday night football. I don't know. We've got all sorts of stuff happening throughout the middle of the week, and we'll have a look at all of it when we return on Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg. You're listening to Casey Radio, 97.7 FM. Back in a bit. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on this Sunday night on Casey Radio, 97.7 FM, where we're previewing Week 13. And before the break, we had a look at all the early games in the early window of the schedule tomorrow, beginning at 5 a.m. That's the time you'll have to get up and tune in and see your team play if they're playing in the early window tomorrow. And there's a couple of really good games. The pick of them, I think, is Cleveland and Tennessee, who are both 8-3, of course, and jostling for a wild card spot. Tennessee may be able to avoid that if they can win their division, which I suspect that they may. It'll certainly help them if they win this one against the Browns tomorrow. That is the game I recall from memory. I'll have a look at the schedule a little later, but I think that is the game on 7 Mate or ESPN. Might be on ESPN, but it is on TV tomorrow, so that's the pick of the games from the early time slot to watch tomorrow. So the mid-afternoon games, starting with a showdown in the best division in football, the NFC West, and it's the LA Rams, the 7-4 LA Rams, up against the Arizona Cardinals, who are 6-5. It was the Rams who had 4 turnovers in the game last week against the Niners. Jared Goff was responsible for 3 of those 4, including a fumble in Niners territory and a pick 6 in the first minute out of halftime. That was, of course, in a game where they only lost by 3 points. The Rams. Jared Goff has thrown 10 interceptions and lost 4 fumbles, which is tied for the second highest number of giveaways in the league. They do have a good record, though, the Rams, against Arizona under Sean McVay, which is, of course, he took over in 2017. McVay, they've never lost to the Cardinals. 6-0. This one is in Arizona, where the Cardinals, they built a 10-0 lead early and held the Patriots to 179 yards of offense last week in New England. But unforced errors and another quiet game from Kyler Murray was the difference in that one. And also Zane Gonzalez, the kicker, he missed a wide right on a 45-yard field goal attempt with only a minute to play that likely would have won the game. And remember, he missed a field goal earlier in the year as well where he didn't make the distance. I can't remember who that was against. Was it Miami? I can't recall. But he unfortunately has missed a couple of big kicks this year, Zane Gonzalez. This is a huge game in the NFC West. I think, oh man, it's a tough one to pick as well. I mean, it's a big one for the Cardinals. If they lose this one and go to 6-6 for all of the good things that have happened this year in the desert, I think they're only sort of going to be sort of clamoring for for one of the lowest sort of wildcard spots, whereas the Rams, I think, should have their sights set on a division title, particularly given the fact that they've beaten the Seahawks once already this year, and they play so well against them. And if they can win and go to 8-4, depending on what happens with the Seahawks this week, perhaps they can jump them again back into top spot. I'm going to pick the Cardinals, but only because it's at home. I'm not very confident in that one at all. That will be actually a nice game, I think, in the that's at 8:05 for those that want to sleep in perhaps a little bit more, get a couple of extra hours of sleep and jump up and watch that one. Speaking of Seattle, they play at the same time. They're at home as well against the New York Giants. The Seahawks, they sacked Carson Wentz 6 times in last Monday night's 23-17 win over the Eagles, and they've piled up 22 sacks since week 8. This is the same Seahawks defense that managed just 9 sacks in the first 6 games of the season. Carlos Dunlap, who of course come over from Cincinnati, has 4 sacks in 4 games, although a foot injury suffered against Philadelphia is a bit of a concern. It looks like he's only touch and go for tomorrow. For the Seahawks, Jamal Adams as well has started to provide a big lift for the Seahawks as that sort of linebacker safety hybrid type player playing up near the line of scrimmage. I've said at length this season that Seattle will not win the Super Bowl this year unless they start to get some help from their defense, helping Russell Wilson and this offense, who are more than capable, of course, with DK Metcalf starting to emerge, Tyler Lockett, who's still having a pretty good year, a breakout year of sorts, and Chris Carson, who was back last week as well. So if this defense can start to, get to the quarterback and come away with some takeaways, then yes, they are a Super Bowl contender, but they need the defense to keep up the good work. The New York Giants, on the other hand, they moved into first place in the NFC East with a close victory over the Bengals. New York Giants, their 4 wins is the fewest for a division leader through 12 weeks of a season since 1970. So if you're thinking that this NFC East is a historically bad division, you're right. The fewest wins for a team that finds themselves on top of the division, in any division, through the first 12 weeks since 1970. The Giants, 6 of the last 7 games have been decided by 3 points or less, so they're playing in close ones. The Giants, if you're a Giants supporter, I hope you're taking your aspirin. Daniel Jones exited the win with a strained hamstring last week. He dodged a more serious injury, though, apparently, so he's in doubt to play against the Seahawks, but it looks like Colt McCoy, who replaced him last week in that win over the Bengals, will start. The journeyman Colt McCoy, of course, former Washington player, but it looks like Daniel Jones may only miss this week, whereas when he exited the game last week, looks like he may have been gone for a little while. Seattle, they've won 4 straight against the New York Giants. This, of course, is at home, where they've been winning a lot this year, Seattle, and I think they will win again over the New York Giants, and that one may not be particularly close. So Seattle to go to 9-3 and maybe put some distance on the Rams, who of course will be playing at the same time against Arizona. So that might be 2 games to actually flick between them and keep an eye on. At 8:25, the Philadelphia Eagles, who are 3-7-1, will go to Lambeau Field to play the Packers, who are 8-3. The Packers trail the Saints by 1 game in the race for the NFC's number 1 seed, but they do have the head-to-head tiebreaker in hand over the Saints, so keep an eye on that. They are 11-2, the Packers, at home since 2019, which is the best winning percentage of any team at home in that span. Some worrying signs, though, on the offensive line. Star center Corey Linsley is out, and I think Pro Football Focus actually have him as the number 1 ranked center in the league this season, Corey Linsley, such as his production as the anchor point on that offensive line. So that's a bit of a worry, and he's out of contract as well. So a double worry there for the Packers. For the Eagles, Doug Peterson told reporters Tuesday this week that he was giving no assurances that he would Carson Wentz would keep that he would keep his job through the end of the season. Doug Peterson talking about himself there, which is a fair old admission for a head coach who brought them their only Super Bowl championship only 3 years ago, or less than 3 years ago. Since 1950, Carson Wentz, back on him. We can't get away from Carson Wentz when we're talking about the Eagles, can we? He is the sixth quarterback since 1950 and the only one under the age of 30 to have a passer rating more than 24 points below his combined rating over the previous 3 seasons. So that's from NFL research. So that tells you the sort of season Carson Wentz is having, and what a fall from grace that has been from Carson Wentz. I remember when he was absolutely slinging it around in 2017, and then when he went down, everyone was like, well, okay, they needed Carson Wentz to win the Super Bowl. Now they're done. And then, of course, Nick Foles come in, and they go on to win it. And at that time, I don't think I was alone here. This was before Patrick Mahomes burst onto the scene. I would have taken Carson Wentz ahead of a lot of the young quarterbacks in the league, such was the sort of regard that I held him in. And now he's absolutely fallen apart. And so has the team. And I don't really know how to put my finger on it. Sure, the coaching's probably not helping. They're doing some bizarre stuff on offense, but he just doesn't look confident. He's just doing some really bizarre stuff like holding on to the ball, and he's almost just reluctant to get rid of the ball. And it feels like that he thinks in his mind that all of the poor form that he's been in, he just will be able to sort of unravel all of that in one big play down the field. That's almost the sense that I get when I'm watching Carson Wentz. They go to Green Bay to play the Packers, who have their eyes set on the number one seed in the NFC. I don't think Philadelphia will cause too much resistance for the Packers. Remember, Philadelphia early last season went into Lambeau Field and beat the Packers. I don't think they'll get anywhere near them tomorrow. The next game is New England at the LA Chargers. Cam Newton for the Patriots last week salvaged a pretty poor day for him statistically with a late 14-yard scramble on 3rd and 13 that turned into a 29-yard play when Isaiah Simmons was flagged for a late hit. And 4 plays later was the Nick Folk 50-yard field goal, which he nailed. And New England, their next 3 are on the road against the Chargers, the Rams, so they may as well stay out in LA. I wonder if they'll do that. They probably won't, given the whole coronavirus protocols that are in place. And then they're down in Florida to play Miami. So if they can reel off some wins there, they may be able to sort of get to sort of 7 wins, 8 wins going into the last couple of weeks. And if they can get to 9 wins, they may be able to sneak in. I think 9 wins might get somebody into the playoffs in the AFC this year, but they don't look like it, do they? They look like a shell of their former selves. And they now have lost 7 games in a season, or they may be about to tomorrow. Sorry, they're of course 5-6. If they lose tomorrow, it'll be their 7th loss. And it'll be the first time since 2002 that they've lost 7 games in a season. They're averaging 20.8 points a game, which is the fewest since 2000, which was, of course, Bill Belichick's first year. The Rams, they failed to take advantage of 3 Buffalo turnovers. The Chargers, that is, getting my LA teams mixed up, failed to capitalize on 3 Buffalo turnovers in the second half last week. Justin Herbert connected on a beautiful Hail Mary pass to put the Bolts at the Bills' goal line with no timeouts, and then a handoff, and then a doomed pass, and then a field goal unit running on, and then off again, and then a pretty awful-looking quarterback sneak as time expired, and they had to watch another possible victory slip through their hands. That was a pretty awful sequence of plays to finish that game, and really only the Chargers could muster that one. They're at home against the Patriots. I'm going to back them in to get a win here, and get to 4-8, although these are 2 teams that I have lost faith in this season. Sunday night football this week is Kansas City at Denver. How about Tyreek Hill last week? He boasted over 200 yards receiving by the end of the first quarter, and he finished his day with 13 catches for 269 yards and 3 touchdowns on 15 targets. I think he ended up, Tyreek Hill, with the 12th most receiving yards in a game in NFL history. Mahomes, he's rightly praised for his next-level arm talent, but he's also an incredible scrambler with untouchable football IQ, and he showed that last week in the win over the Bucs. Denver head coach Vic Fangio said, I was disappointed on a couple of levels that our quarterbacks put us in this position, and that our quarterbacks put the league in this position. So he was pretty filthy on his quarterbacks last week, and may he well be. Well, he might be, I should say. Denver, 25 giveaways in 11 games this season, which is the most. Patrick Mahomes has had 25 in his career. Can you believe that? It'll be interesting to see who plays at quarterback tomorrow for the Broncos. Kansas City, they've won 10 straight against the Broncos. It will be 11 tomorrow. I think Monday Night Football is Washington at Pittsburgh. They failed to establish the run last week, the Steelers, and they were doomed by drops from their wide receivers as well. Washington, they have a great front seven, which should cause the Steelers some problems. Antonio Gibson is running wild and turning into a real impact player as well. He was awesome on Thanksgiving. It's at home for the Steelers. This is a doubleheader on Monday Night Football. Actually, this is the first one. I reckon they should be on upset alert here, the Steelers. They're backing up off after a short week, and Washington are feeling good about themselves, and they're starting to look like a team that can win that division. But I am going to stick fat with the Steelers and say they'll go to 12-0, but they should be on upset alert. The next one, Buffalo at San Francisco. This is in Arizona, where the Niners set up home base to play up the rest of the season. It's their first home game not played at a home stadium in San Francisco since 1989, excluding a game that they played in London in 2010. The Bills, they had a bunch of turnovers last week, but their defense allowed just 3 points off the ensuing Chargers' possessions. The Bills, they rushed for 172 yards at 5.7 yards a clip last week. Devin Singletary and Zach Moss were really good. The Niners' defense, they forced 4 turnovers on the Rams last week, including a pick 6 via rookie Javon Kinlaw. Deebo Samuel has been back and he's been in good form as well. He makes their offense look a lot better. I'm going to back in Buffalo to beat the Niners in this one, which is essentially a neutral game. And then we do have Tuesday Night Football again, and it's Baltimore at home to Dallas, which was supposed to be Thursday night. Baltimore, commendable effort against the Steelers with so many defensive players out. They've activated a few guys who will play in this particular game. It could have been different if they converted that touchdown in the final seconds of the first half. Interesting clock management. And the Steelers, of course, their players laying on top of the Ravens guys. And Dallas, they've had 7 different starting O-line combinations this year, which is the second most. This is in Baltimore. I think Baltimore might get their 7th win of the season, and boy, do they need it after a difficult stretch. Okie dokie, that is the slate of games in Week 13. I'll take my final break, and then when we come back, we'll have a look at college football and answer your questions as well. You're listening to Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, back in a bit on KC Radio 97.7 FM. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, on this Sunday evening on KC Radio 97.7 FM, where before the break we went through and previewed all the games in Week 13, a week in which there will be some really big games and some big moments for some teams and players to lift their team to big wins within their division and within the conference as well as we go down the stretch and teams battle for division titles and wildcard spots. 2 teams on the bye this week, Tampa Bay and Carolina, will not suit up. They'll have a rest and join us again in Week 14. We'll go now and turn our attention to what's happening in college football. Of course, the college football playoffs, the second edition of the college football playoffs, or rankings, I should say, for playoff rankings, come out on Wednesday last week, and there was no change at the top with Alabama still number 1. I can't see them moving out of that position. Notre Dame was 2, Clemson 3, and Ohio State 4, with Ohio State, of course, not playing last week, but they did get back on the park, thankfully for them, this week and played Michigan State and beat Michigan State. We may as well get into the game, shall we? The Buckeyes, they beat Michigan State 52-12, a game in which Justin Fields, the quarterback there, who you may have heard, is having another pretty good season in the, I think, 5 games that Ohio State have played. He's looked pretty good, and he's threw 4 touchdowns, and I think ran for another one as well earlier today. So another good performance for Justin Fields and the Buckeyes. Louisiana Lafayette, who are ranked 25th, they beat Appalachian State. This was yesterday on Saturday, 24-21. Oklahoma State, they beat TCU beat the Cowboys 29-22. That was a big win for the Horned Frogs. Oklahoma State were ranked 15, so they've gone down in a conference game there to TCU. Texas A&M, who are ranked 5th, they beat Auburn 31-20, but I can't see them getting into the top 4 in the next playoff rankings that will be out on Wednesday morning, simply because the 4 teams above them didn't lose. The big upset of the week came against Marshall, who were ranked 21. They were shut out, actually, by Rice, 20-0. The University of Rice, and I think they were 3 touchdown underdogs, Rice, and then they win in a shutout. One of the most incredible performances we've seen this season. The University of North Carolina beat WCU 49-9, so a big win for the Tar Heels there. Notre Dame ranked 2 in the country. Like I said, they had a pretty comfortable victory over Syracuse 45-21. Tulsa beat Navy 19-6. Iowa State, who have their sights set on a Big 12 championship, and that would be their first Big 12 championship since 1912. Can you believe they had a win today over West Virginia, 42-6. Indiana had a big win over Wisconsin, 14-6. They are ranked 12. Indiana, they beat Wisconsin, who were ranked 16. So they look like they might move up a few spots. Indiana, Florida beat Tennessee in SEC action, 31-19. Florida ranked 6, and they now book their spot in the SEC championship game against Alabama. Iowa beat Illinois 35-21. Stanford had a win in the Pac-12. They beat Washington 31-26. That was a good win over Washington, actually, because Washington ranked, or were ranked, 22 in the nation. Stanford unranked, of course. Coastal Carolina, they had a big win over BYU, not in terms of margin, but just in terms of what that means for their season. They were ranked 18, Coastal. They beat BYU 22-17, and that game actually went right down to the final play where Zach Wilson connected with one of his wide receivers and I think ended up like something like 5 yards short of the end zone. So they go down in that one. BYU, Oregon were upset as well by the University of Cal, 21-17. The University of California winners over the Ducks. Clemson made light work of Virginia Tech. Trevor Lawrence playing quite well in that one, 45-10 winners the Tigers. Over the Hokies, Oklahoma beat Baylor 27-14 in another Big 12 game there, I should say. Alabama smashed LSU 55-17, so they will play Florida in the SEC championship game. Miami beat Duke, shut out Duke, I should say, 48-0, and there will be a game between USC, the Trojans, and Washington State, which has been rescheduled to tomorrow at 11:30, so that'll be a rare occasion where a college football game goes up against the NFL Sunday slate. The other big news also in that one is that Notre Dame and Clemson will meet again in a couple of weeks for the ACC championship. Of course, Notre Dame beat Clemson earlier in the season, albeit a Clemson without a couple of players on defense and, of course, their most important player, Trevor Lawrence. They're in a situation, though, Notre Dame, where they may not have to necessarily win that game to remain in the top 4 and get into the playoffs for, I think, the second time. So that'll be one that we've circled on the calendars for a couple of weeks' time. So that's what happened in college football this morning. To your questions now, guys, of course, you can send me through questions on Twitter at theboylives_26 if you want to get in touch and send through some questions that you might have, or you can just put a post on the page on Twitter or Facebook. Talkin American Footy has its own Twitter and Facebook page, so if you want to shoot through a question that way, you can, like these folk have. Jules, his question here is, do you think DK Metcalf will make the All-Pro team this season? Well, he's having a great year, isn't he, DK Metcalf? He's actually leading the league in yards with 1,039, just ahead of Tyreek Hill, who's just behind him here. And just having a little gaze at some of his other stats. His average per catch, almost 18 yards a catch, 17.9. So that's just below DJ Moore, of all players, in Carolina, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling as well. Touchdowns, he's got 9 touchdowns on the season, DK Metcalf, which is third. Tyreek Hill has the most with 13. Adam Thielen, Mike Evans, and Devontae Adams all tied with second with 11. To be honest, it's probably that group of receivers who are in the discussion for that All-Pro team. They generally pick 3 receivers to go or to make that team. DK Metcalf, I'm looking here, is also averaging the second most yards per game with 94.5 behind only Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is probably the one that I would pencil in as probably the number one wide receiver on the season so far, and that's incredible when you consider he's missed 2 games. But he has been the standout wide receiver for me, so he's probably the first one in. You probably put Tyreek Hill in as well because he's had an incredible season. And then for that third spot, you're probably tossing up between DK Metcalf, DeAndre Hopkins, who's had a really good season, and they're probably the two. Keenan Allen has been pretty good, although he's down the list a little while. Stephon Diggs has had a really good season, but he hasn't gone into the end zone that much. Stephon Diggs, he's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th in the league for yards, but only 4 touchdowns. So they're using him to get to the end zone, the Bills, but they're not using him to get into the end zone. So they're probably the guys. If I was to make the pick, I'd probably say Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, and DK Metcalf get in as the three. That's the 3 wide receivers, and that would be incredible for DK Metcalf, who last year taken in the second round, late second round. In fact, he might have been the last pick in the second round, I think, and he had 7 or 8 wide receivers go ahead of him, and now he'll be an All-Pro by my sort of calculations, or if I'm to sort of have a stab at it in just his second year. So, do I think he'll make the All-Pro team? I think he will if he can keep things up the way he's going. Thanks for your question, Jules. The next one from Charlie: is Baker Mayfield holding the Cleveland Browns back? He's not having a great season, is he, Baker Mayfield? I'm just sort of having a look at some stats here. Completion percentage, Baker Mayfield, he's 29th in the league, 61.2, and the only guys below him, the only one below him that's played in every game is Carson Wentz, and we know the season he's having. The other 2 guys below Baker Mayfield is Sam Darnold. This is in terms of completion percentage. Sam Darnold and Drew Lock. So he's got guys like Daniel Jones ahead of him, Lamar Jackson. We know there's been some issues with his passing game this year. Tom Brady, Nick Foles, who's only played in 8 games, which has bumped his percentage up a little bit. But that's not where you want your number one quarterback to be. In terms of yards per game as well, if I can find where he is here, Baker Mayfield, 22nd, 2,108 yards. So, Carson Wentz has thrown for more yards. Tannehill, Daniel Jones, Joe Burrow before going down. So, he's only really sort of average in terms of that stat as well. Now, I'm just having a look here at the adjusted quarterback rating, and he's only middle of the pack in adjusted quarterback rating as well, 16th, which is actually surprising. I thought he'd be a little bit lower than that. He's 68.6, which is just below Justin Herbert, which is funny because I think if they had Justin Herbert, I think Cleveland would be a Super Bowl contender. I would have them in the AFC right there on that sort of second rung of teams with Pittsburgh just below Kansas City. And you may say, well, hang on, the LA Chargers have a pretty good roster around Justin Herbert, and they have Justin Herbert, and they've won 3 games. The LA Chargers have 2 things. Sorry, the Browns have 2 things that the LA Chargers don't have. And that's a much improved offensive line from last year. They've got a borderline top 10 offensive line, and they have a beast of a running game. And they're the 2 things that you need to win in the playoffs. If the Browns go and get an exciting young quarterback, like that can have an impact like Justin Herbert, I think that'll catapult them into Super Bowl calculations. If they had Justin Herbert this year, Cleveland, they would be, in my opinion, in consideration for the Super Bowl. So that probably answers your question. Is Baker Mayfield holding them back? I think that he is. The final question as well: where do you think Aaron Donald ranks among the all-time defensive linemen? That's from Tony. Well, he'd have to be up there. I saw Marcus Spears actually a couple of weeks ago on Get Up say that he's the best defensive lineman to ever play in the NFL. So that's incredible. That, of course, comes from a former offensive lineman, Marcus Spears. So don't take my word for it. Take his. I think when his career is over, I mean, he's obviously a first ballot Hall of Famer, and I think he would certainly be in the discussion at the very least. So thank you for your questions, guys. I'm about to wrap up. Let's have a look at the games on TV tomorrow and throughout the weekend. There's a whole bunch of games. Tomorrow at 5 a.m, there's the Saints and the Falcons on at ESPN. And there's the Browns and the Titans game, which I alluded to earlier. That is on 7 Mate at 5 a.m. So I suggest you get up and have a look at that one. The Rams and the Cardinals on ESPN from 8 a.m. The Eagles and the Packers from 8:30. That's on 7 Mate. And then Sunday Night Football, of course, on ESPN. The Broncos and the Chiefs Tuesday, the doubleheader, both games on ESPN, Washington and Pittsburgh, and then the night game, San Francisco and the Bills. And then on Wednesday morning, or Wednesday afternoon, about lunchtime, nice sort of game, nice sort of time to have a game. It's the Ravens and the Cowboys. They are the games on TV this week in Week 13. Enjoy the football, gang, and I'll see you next week, Sunday night, 10 p.m, to have a chat about everything that we witnessed on Talkin American Footy with me, Brent Sternberg, Sunday night next week from 10 p.m. on KC Radio 97.7 FM. I'll see you then, gang. Bye-bye.